Okay, so we're going to have a look at adding some JavaScript into our website. Now you can obviously run JavaScript both on your computer completely, or you can run it as part of a front-end website. That's what we're going to look at for the first part of this course. We will be moving into kind of the back-end Node.js in the second unit. So for now, what I want us to do is to go ahead and open up our terminal like we do every single lesson. And head on over to our dev folder. And then I want us to go into our classwork, so cd classwork. And then let's make a directory for intro to JS. Intro to JS, and then move into it. So cd intro-to-js, and then open in VS Code, code space dot. Excellent. So let's go ahead and just create a HTML file, because we always need a HTML file if we're going to do anything in the browser. So we'll say index.html. And let's go ahead also and make a JavaScript file. So we'll have app.js. Let me just zoom in a little bit for you and move us around here. Okay, one thing that we need to do first, obviously, is we need to make our boilerplate code in our index.html, use Emmet abbreviation for that. And then, like when we link up our CSS files, we need to link our JS file into our HTML as well. And we'll use what's called a script tag for that. Now we can use VS Code's autocomplete to help us out here. And without opening the tag, so do not open the tag, we're just going to write script, or start writing script. You'll see that comes up here. We can kind of have it write a little bit for us. So we're going to say script : src. And what this has done is kind of, it's put in, using Emmet abbreviation again, that the correct tags for us. Now, it doesn't know where our app is, but very much like our CSS files, what we can do here is just type in our app.js. And again, we can use the autocomplete there as well to fill that in for us. Okay, let's go ahead and save that and open up Live Server. Of course, there will be absolutely nothing on the page at the moment. But what we can do is, if we right-click and open up the developer console using inspect, if we go to the console here, this is where we're going to see all of our JavaScript outputs from now on. So let me just bring this a little bit down, because we don't need all of this real estate just yet. You feel free to put your screen exactly as you want it. I'm going to put this here like this. Okay, so heading to our app.js file, this is where we're going to write all of our JavaScript code. And let's just see something happen in the console. Well, the way that we print something out to the console, we'll go into this in a little bit more detail, but just for now, follow along with what I'm doing. So here we can say console, because we want it to go to the console. And then what do we want to do? Well, we want to log something to the console. So we say console dot, and then log, L-O-G, add some brackets after it, or parentheses if you're using American English. I flip-flop between the two, brackets or parentheses. And then in here, we can say log something out. Now we're going to log a string, and we'll look at strings in real detail in a moment. But for now, just add a quotation mark in there. And you'll see VS Code has added the one afterwards as well for us. And I'm going to say here, start of program. So if we now Command S that and save, fantastic. Live server has gone and run our app for us, and we get logged out to the console, start of program. Let's see if I can just zoom in a little bit for you there. Fantastic. So we've now got things coming up to the console. Let's just try that again. We're going to say console.log, and then inside the parentheses, we shall say end of program. And save, and we'll get start program and end of program. When we get into asynchronous programming, you'll probably call me a liar for saying this. However, JavaScript will always run from the top of your program to the bottom. It doesn't change the direction in which it works. Of course, we'll get into loops and stuff, and it can give the impression that that's what it's doing. But for now, just remember, it will always start from line 1 of your program and then work its way down. Okay, so that's brilliant. We've been able to print some stuff to the console. Let's have a look at variables. Now, variables are just a way for our program to kind of remember something, be it for the whole duration that the program is running, or just temporarily. So how do we declare a variable? So there's 3 ways that we can do it, but we're going to concentrate mostly on 2, and we'll get into why in a bit. But if you just follow along with me, what we can do is we can declare a variable and then print it out to the console, and we'll talk about what we're doing as we do it. So one of the ways that we can declare a variable is using the const keyword, C-O-N-S-T, const. And once we've written that const keyword, we can then think of a name for our variable. So in this instance, I'm going to call it my name. On the right of this, we then need to add an equal sign, and we're going to put a string in this variable. So again, we need those single quotes. So I'm going to say George here. You obviously put your own name instead, or feel free to use mine. So let's talk about what we've actually done here. Well, we've made a bucket of data, if you like, a little bucket. And if you imagine, the label on that bucket is this, my name. And inside that bucket, we've then put this string of George. Now, the great thing about variables is we can go ahead and just kind of pluck out that bucket whenever we want to. And we can say here, console.log, and then my name. So now what we'll say is, hey, go ahead and log to the console whatever is inside this my name bucket. So if I save that now, you'll see that we get start of program, and then George, and then end of program. Fantastic, because we're starting here, we're saying log out whatever is in this bucket, and then end the program here. There's another way that we can declare variables, and that's by using a different keyword called let. So we'll say let my age, and then we'll say equals, and I am actually 31, so we will put that there, but you feel free to put your age there instead. Notice that I haven't put single quotes around this. That's because this is a number, and again, we'll have a look at these in far more detail shortly. So underneath here, I'm going to go ahead and console.log my age. Hit save. Fantastic. We get now printed to the console, age of 31. Now, yes, we have just declared these variables in 2 different ways. Well, what's the difference between them? Well, in a nutshell, Const variables you cannot change later on, but let variables you can change later on. So let's go ahead and try and do that. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say my name equals George, and then right underneath it, I'm going to say now my name equals Sam. And don't forget your quotes either side of that. So if I save this now, you'll see that we actually get an error. And the thing is, with some JavaScript errors are really nice and helpful for us. They will tell us exactly what the issue is. Some JavaScript errors, not so much. But what it's saying here is we've got a type error, and it's an assignment to a constant variable. Okay, well, it means that we just can't do this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to comment this out, and a little shortcut for commenting stuff out is if you just put your cursor or you highlight what it is you want to comment out, you just do command and / or control and /, and you'll see what it does is it adds these two little slashes at the beginning of that line. We can do it with multiple lines as well. So if I just do that, you see, and it kind of, if you hit it again, it will kind of toggle it on and off. So what does this mean, this two / here? This basically tells JavaScript, hey, I want this in my program, I want it to be here in the code, but I want you to completely ignore it and just pretend it doesn't exist. Now, the reason they're called comments is because we can use them to add things for us, the developer. We can say, this will not work. And you see it's gone green so that it kind of tells us that this is not part of our program. Okay, so if we command S again, excellent, we no longer get that error because we're telling JavaScript, hey, go ahead and ignore this here because it's a comment. Great, let's try it with a let variable instead. Let's go ahead and try to change this, change our variable or reassign our variable. So I'm going to say my age equals 25, I wish. And if we save that, fantastic, we now get printed out to the console the number 25 instead of 31. Well, let's go line by line then, what's happening. So we've declared this let variable. The my age bucket, if you like, has got 31 inside it. And then down here, we're saying, hey, bin that 31, get rid of that, pretend it doesn't exist, and instead put the number 25 into that bucket. Then we're saying, go ahead and log out whatever is inside that bucket. Whatever is inside the my age bucket, log it out here. And that's why we get 25. Okay, so there is one other thing that I want to show you, but I kind of don't want you to use. And there's another way to declare variables. Now, prior to about 2015, this was the only option for declaring variables in JavaScript. And that is using the keyword var. Now, the reason I'm showing you this is because when you're looking for answers online, you Google things and you maybe end up in Stack Overflow, you might see people using the var keyword to declare variables. So I'm going to say var, my var, let's just think of a name for it, and then equals, I don't know, something. Now, a var variable can be changed just like a let variable, but it comes down to something called scope, and we will be looking at scope in much more detail later on in the course. For now though, I just want you to remember that whilst the var keyword is available to you, you should probably be using a let or a const. The var keyword can get you a little bit stuck in certain places. There are some times where you have to use var, depending on the program that you're writing. But I would rather you didn't. Okay, so let's take a look at some things that we can put in variables, some data types. We're going to look at the simple data types here. So first of all, let's look at numbers. We have already had a quick look at numbers here. But what I'm going to do is I'm just going to comment out all of this code here. And remember how we do that? We use command and / or control and / on Windows. Don't worry about this. Basically, this just means that we've commented out something twice, and the Better Comments plugin that we installed when we installed VS Code is basically looking at this and saying, well, if you've commented it out twice, you probably don't need it. So I'm going to make it really obvious that it's been crossed out. It's just a comment. So don't worry about that too much. But either way, JavaScript will completely ignore everything that is commented out. So down here under all of this that we wrote earlier, let's have a look at some numbers. So I'm going to write a number. I'm going to put a number in a variable. So I'm going to say const num1 equals, and then put a number in it. So I'm going to put 2 in this. And to write a number, we just use the number. We don't need to surround it by anything or do anything to it. We just write the number. And down here, I'm going to say const num2 equals, I don't know, 5. Great. So now we have those two numbers in those variables. Well, what can we do with these numbers? Well, we can do some maths on them. So, for example, what I can do here is I could say console.log, and then we need to add the parentheses, don't forget. And then let's say num1, and then we'll use the plus symbol, num2. And if I save this, fantastic, we now get logged out 7. Well, that's because it's gone ahead and it's got whatever is in num1 in this variable, and then we've said add that to whatever is in this variable here. So 2 plus 5, yep, that's 7. Fantastic. There's a few other symbols that we can use. So I'm just going to comment this to say addition. Well, what if we want to do the opposite? We want to do subtraction. Well, here, let's go ahead and do console.log num1, and then we'll use the minus or dash symbol, num2. So if we save this now, yeah, we get -3. Fantastic. That's because 2 minus 5 is -3. So notice that it does do the first number minus the second number. Obviously, when you're adding, it doesn't matter because 2 plus 5 is 7 and 5 plus 2 is 7. But 2 minus 5 is -3, whereas if we were to swap these round, we would actually get +3 because 5 minus 2 is 3. Okay, that's just some basic maths there, addition and subtraction. Let's now go ahead and multiply the two numbers. So let's add a comment, multiply, and we'll say here console.log num1, and then to multiply them, we use the asterisk symbol. And this is, for me, it's Shift and 8 to get this up, and then we'll say num2. Save this. Fantastic. And we get output 10 because 2 times 5 is 10. Okay, let's go ahead and divide now. So we'll say here, divide, divide, and let's console.log out num1, and then to divide we use a /, just a single /. Num1 divided by num2. Go ahead and save that. And then we get 0.4. So if you've come to this thinking about other programming languages, or you've got a background in kind of higher mathematics, you'll know that this 10 here, this is an integer because it's a whole number. But you'll also know that this 0.4 here is what's called a float, or a floating point number, because it has a decimal place here. Something to note is that JavaScript doesn't care. It just sees them as numbers. It does not care that it's a floating point. It just has one data type, and that is number. So there's another couple of operators that I want us to look at here. And the first one is called the modulo operator. Now, if you paid attention in mathematics when you were younger, this will not be new to you, but it was new to me when I was learning to code many, many years ago. So this is called the modulo or modulus operator. So the way that we use this, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to say console.log, and then we'll say num1, and then we'll use the percentage sign. And for me, this is just shift and 5. So we'll say num1, percentage sign, or modulo, num2. So if I save this now, we get out the number 2. Okay, that's a little bit weird. So what's this actually doing? Well, what this is doing is it says, what's the remainder once the numbers have been divided together? So 5 goes into 2 0 times, and we've got 2 left over. Okay, if that doesn't make too much sense, let's go ahead and swap these around, and it might make a little bit more sense in your head. So we're going to say num2 here, modulo num1. So if we save this, we now get 1. Well, that's because we're saying how many times does num1, does 2 go into 5? Well, it goes into it twice. And then what's left over? 1 is left over. So that's what this gives us. It's kind of what's the remainder once you have divided the two numbers. This is actually very handy for working out if a number is odd or even, but we'll come to that in a little bit later when we do conditionals. So there's just one more thing that I want to show you, and that is the increment operator. So here I'm going to say console.log num1. So if we just save this out, we get number 2 there because num1 has the value of 2. And then just below here, I'm going to write num1, and then we're going to say plus plus. We're going to use the double plus symbol straight after it. And then let's go ahead and console log num1 again. So console.log num1. So if I save this, okay, of course we're trying to do an assignment to a constant variable. Right, let's just be a bit naughty and change this const to a let. Right here. So save that now. And you'll see what's happening here is, okay, so we're printing out on line 34 whatever num1 is, and you see it's line 34 here. It's telling us the file and the line it's on, and it has the value of 2. And then we're using what's called the increment operator, and we're saying, hey, add 1 to this variable, and then log it out again, which means that we get on line 36, it has the value of 3. Take a moment to think, is there a way to go down 1 instead? sure some of you will have worked this out. Of course, we can use minus, minus. So if we save this, again, on line 34, we have the value of 2. And then on line 36, we have the value of 1. Okay, great. So that's kind of numbers in a nutshell. There's a bit more to it than this, but this gives us a good flavour of what we can do with numbers. So let's just go ahead and comment out all of our number stuff. And again, command / to comment all of that out. And let's just save that to make sure that nothing's coming up on our console. Great, that's all kind of disappeared, but we still have it available to us to refer back to later on. So let's have a look at some string data types. Now, we have had a look at strings very briefly when we were just console logging stuff out. In fact, we're using one right here. But let's have a look at what we can do with these. So let's go ahead and just console.log, add some parentheses, and then use some single quotation marks. So let's say single quotes and paste that there. And we get that single quotes printed to the console. Well, what happens if we try to do this? So I want it to print out George's quote, as in it belongs to me. So it's George '(S) space and then quote. So what I'll do is I'll just go ahead and write. I'm not going to look at my screen because I'm just looking at my keyboard here. I'm going to write George is quotes here. Okay, and then Command S. Okay. There's something really weird has happened here. Oh, it looks like it's kind of ended my string early. Yeah, missing after argument list. No, that's a bit weird, isn't it? Okay, well, that's because we cannot use apostrophes in single quoted strings. So how do we get around that? Well, the easiest way to get around it is we just use a different type. We instead go ahead and use double quotes around our string. So if we do Command S here, fantastic. We've now said that this is a string still. We're using double quotes instead. And we can now use kind of our single quote inside our string. There is another way to do it if you absolutely wanted to use single quotes. So I've got single quotes, but I've still got an apostrophe in it. We can use something called escaping. And with that, we can put a backslash in front of the apostrophe. And then it will kind of say, it will go along our string and print things out. And then it'll see the backslash and it'll say, oh, okay, well, the next character is a special one. So I know that it's an apostrophe, and then I'll continue. So that's just another way of doing it. What if you actually want a backslash in your string, I hear you scream? Well, we can kind of just do the same thing. So I'm just going to put here, I want to now put a backslash in my string. Well, if we try and do this, nothing happens because it's just escaping the next character. So what we do is we add double backslash. So if we now save this, we now get the backslash in our string. So escaping is just something that's kind of good to know that you've got in your toolkit. The easiest way, if you want to put an apostrophe in your strings, is just to use double quotes. And you can do the opposite as well. If you want to use double quotes in your string, you just make sure that you declare the string with single quotes. Okay, so that's just some of the things, kind of a few gotchas, if you like, around strings. Some places that you can get a bit unstuck, but this is how you can get out of them. Okay, so let's go ahead and make a variable and put a string inside it. So we'll say const my string. Let's just use the word JavaScript. And you'll notice that I've put this all lowercase, but that's because we're going to look at some things later on. So one thing that we can do is we can get some information about this string. One of the things that I'll be doing here is getting the length of the string. So one way that we can do that is by using the .length property. So let's go and print that to the console. So we'll say here console.log, my string. And you see I've just used enter there because the autocomplete was coming up there. My string, and then we will say dot, and it's come up with all of these different things that we can use. So basically, if it's a little box like this, it means it's a method. Don't worry, you'll be an expert on methods after the object-oriented lesson. And these little blue boxes here are properties. So there's loads of things that we can do and get from our strings. The one that we're interested in is the length of the string. So if I go ahead and Command S, you'll see that we get the output of 10 on line 42. Here we are. Because the length of JavaScript, it is 10 characters long. Let's just check that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Fantastic. Yeah. So it's 10 characters long. Of course, we kind of could have found that out ourselves. But if we had a string that was an entire book, for example, and we wanted to know the length of it for whatever reason, then this would be very handy. Okay, so how do we put things together? So what we can do is we can do something called concatenating. How do we put strings together? So let's have a look at constructing a sentence here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say console.log, and what I want this to say, I'm just going to put an example in a comment up here. What I want to say is the string JavaScript is 10 cars or characters long. Okay, great. So how can we do that? Well, we could just have a string saying the string JavaScript is 10 cars long. But what if this changes? What if we want this to work with the word JavaScript? What if we want it to work with the word hello? What if we want it to work with the word George? That could be variable. So one of the ways that we can do this is we can concatenate these things together. So what I'm going to say here is the string, and then add a space. Oh, actually, let's see it without the space first. The string, and then we will add a plus outside of that quotation mark there of my string plus, and then a string of is, and then another plus, and then we will say my string dot length. I'm just going to make this a little bit wider. When you get used to this a bit more, you'll be okay with everything being multi-lined and stuff, but I'll just try and fit this all on one line for now. So my string dot length, and then plus, and then another string of cars long. Okay, let's save that and see what we get. Oh, fantastic. So we get the string JavaScript is 10 cars long. Okay, so we're nearly there. It looks about right. It looks like it's getting there. Let me just make this a little bit bigger so that we can see all of that in one line. So we get the space string, JavaScript is 10 chars long. Cool, so the reason for that is because JavaScript will just type this exact string and then this exact string and then this exact string, so on and so forth. It doesn't care that we haven't put, that it doesn't make any sense. So what we need to do is we need to put in the spaces. So we'll say the string space plus my string is, and then we need to put a space around each of these. And then we also need to put a space here. So if we save that now, we should end up with a space between each word. Fantastic. Yeah, the string JavaScript is 10 chars long. Great. Let's try that with anything that we like. Anything we like. Save that. Hey, fantastic. The string anything we like is 17 chars long. Brilliant. So you see, one of the powers of using variables and using variables in strings is that when things change, kind of the rest of your code updates, if you like. It works with anything that you give it. Obviously, there's edge cases where it may not work exactly as you expect, but for now, this is all good. So let's have a look at a few other things that we can do. This is one way of concatenating the string together. But something we can do is use something called a template literal. So let's just add a template literal here. I can never remember whether it's 1 or 2 T's. Oh well, go and Google it and find out. So what we can do here is we can use some clever syntax to basically do this, but it just looks a little bit nicer. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say console.log and open some parentheses. And then we're going to use what are called backticks. Now, for me, this is just down by my left shift key. You'll have to kind of find them on your keyboard. So it's kind of looks a little bit like an apostrophe, like a quotation mark, but it's not. It's a backwards backtick. So what we can do here is we can write the string and then space. And then to add in our variables or kind of add in our JavaScript, we can use a dollar symbol. So that's just shift and 4 and then curly brackets. And now you'll see that this has gone pink to tell us that this is not really part of the string. This is part of the template literal. This kind of will get imported, if you like, from whatever we put in there. So the string, my string, then I'm going to come out of it here and say is, and then add another space. And then we need to put another kind of bit of JavaScript in here. So another dollar sign, another curly bracket, and we'll say my string dot length. And then I'm going to use the right key just to come outside of that now. And then we'll say chars long. And then we save that. So let's go and have a look what the output of that is. Feel free to pause if you're still catching up. So let's have a look here. Okay, brilliant. We get the same thing as we did before, but just in a slightly different way of doing it. Although I did put a capital T in here. That's my fault. So it's entirely up to you which you think is the easiest or the best. As I say, there's pros and cons to each of them. You'll find that as we go along. But this is 2 ways of kind of concatenating together or joining together strings for use. Okay, so let's have a look at just a couple of other things that we can do. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to make everything uppercase. So let's go and say console.log my string dot, and then you'll see there is loads and loads of stuff that we can do here. Let's go and scroll down. Okay, so we've got 2 uppercase here. So let's type it out instead, but we'll say 2 uppercase. Now this isn't quite enough because this is not a property, this is a method. So after this, what we have to do is we have to add some opening and closing parentheses. As I say, this will make a lot more sense further on in the course, but for now, just understand that properties such as length, we can just use dot length, but then methods, we need to use dot, then the name of the method, and then we add parentheses after it. Okay, so let's go ahead and Control S, Command S that. Brilliant, and now we get anything we like. So the my string at the moment does have this capital A already, but it doesn't matter, we're just making the whole thing uppercase. What about if we want to make it to lowercase? Pause the video and see if you can work this out yourself. Okay, if you paused it, then let's have a look at what you did. I'm sure you've been able to work this out, but we'll do console.log my string dot to lower case. Let's save that. Fantastic, and you'll see that we get the whole thing, but now in lowercase. Excellent. So they're just some of the things that we can do with strings, and I would really encourage you to go and have a play with all of the different methods that are there. Make sure that I'm just going to demonstrate here. So we've got a string here, and we've looked at this a little bit already, but VS Code will come up with loads of different things that you can use with these strings. We'll be using split and slice and search and stuff and replace as we go along the course. You will get to know all of these, but have a try, have a look at what works, see if things work. You know, let's see what ends with does. Don't forget it was a method, so we have to use parentheses. Let's save that. Oh, and we get false. Okay, so let's go and have a look at what that might be because of. So let's go ahead and start typing ends with and have a look what it says. So it returns true if the sequence of elements of search string converted to a string is the same as the corresponding elements of this object. Okay, so what we can see is that it's asking us to put a string in these parentheses. So let's go ahead, ends with, you know, and I'm just trying this out. You should do the same to try and kind of get to grips with what each of these methods might require. So I'm going to say ends with an exclamation mark. Let's save that. And we get true. Brilliant, because this ends with, we're saying, does my string, which is this, end with an exclamation mark? If we said 3, well, that's false. No, it doesn't end with a 3. So have a try, and don't forget, keep reading that MDN reference that you get when you start typing these things out. You might need to just delete a little bit and then type it again to get this to come up. But yeah, have a good read of these, because then when you start thinking about, oh, I wonder if I can do this with a string, you'll probably have a good idea of whether you can or not.